everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of the Heartpanorama podcast. I'm your host Michelle, and today it's time for part 2 of the topic block about social media. Last week I discussed personal versus corporate social media use. If you missed that episode, be sure to catch up on that podcast episode later. Today I'm doing one of my book recommendation episodes again, but this time it's all about social media. As I announced in last week's episode, I would like to introduce you to some books where the social media theme is the base of their plots. To be honest, I've been wanting to talk about these books for ages already, but I didn't want to include them in my regular book recommendations because I wanted to bundle them in a social media related episode like this one. Before I start, here's a quick disclaimer that any mentions of brands, products, or services in this podcast are only included for discussion purposes and are not paid or sponsored. As always, I'm not sharing details of the stories because otherwise I would spoil the books for you in case you would like to read them as well. And here are my top 3 choices. Let's start with number 3. That one is It Started With a Tweet by Anna Bell. It tells the story of Daisy Hobson, who works as a marketing manager. One day she accidentally tweets something personal from her work Twitter account, which causes her to lose her job. Her sister Rosie persuades her to go on a digital detox with her, and that's where the adventure starts. I found this book very funny and entertaining, and at the same time it also portrays the depths of social media addiction, and it makes you think twice about your own social media habits. The way that the protagonist is described here makes you think that she's weird and obsessed way too much with social media, but if you think about it, you might actually recognize yourself there. In the weeks or even months after reading this book, I went on social media remarkably less than before. I can't say as much about my current social media use, so maybe I should reread that book sometime. My choice for top number 2 is 1 in a Million by Lindsay Kelk. 1 in a Million is basically a modern life version of My Fair Lady. That's a musical from 1912. And I love how the book's protagonist Annie Higgins' name is actually a reference to Professor Higgins in the musical. In 1 in a Million, Annie runs a social media agency, and her business is based in some sort of a co-working space, so she frequently crosses paths with other tenants in the building. And one of them is Dr. Samuel Page, and he's a historian who is working on his new book. After making a bet with the rivaling advertising agency in the building, Annie commits to turning Samuel, aka Sam, into a social media star. This story is so refreshing because nowadays you don't often come across people who hate social media as much as the character Sam does. And the social media enthusiasts among us can find themselves relating to Annie a lot while reading. I really like how the author took the concept of an existing story from 1912 and applied it to a modern day setting, and it actually works. And finally, my top 1 choice is My Not So Perfect Life by Sophie Kinsella. And I told you I can barely do a book recommendation episode without listing a book by Sophie Kinsella. This story is about Katie Brenner, who has a perfect Instagram feed, but her real life is in fact the opposite of perfect. Throughout the book, we see Katie's ups and downs in life. The emphasis is rather on the downs. She learns that it's not all about showing off on social media and that not everything you see on there portrays the entire reality. This is really one of my favorite books, and I think many of us can relate to the main character a lot. Especially nowadays where we compare ourselves a lot with other people on social media, it's important to remember that most people just put positive things on their social media profiles and not feel bad about oneself if one's life doesn't look as perfect. What I love about all 3 of these books is that their main theme is social media without the topic being incorporated in the story disturbingly. The authors do a really good job making social media an essential part of their stories, but at the same time describing it as an everyday thing. I wish there were more books like these out there because social media really is part of our everyday lives by now. Everyone gets in touch with social media in one way or another, no matter how much time they spend on different platforms. Of course, most of the newer books mention Facebook or Instagram at some point, but it's often just like a small side note, not really worth mentioning. I've already bookmarked a few other books with a social media theme in my Goodreads account, but I must say books like these are not really easy to find. Do you have any recommendations for books with that theme? And does one of the books I talked about here sound interesting to you? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and leave a comment below. Also subscribe and activate the notification bell to stay tuned for the next episode, because next week I will head to a new topic blog where I will talk some more about books. Until next time, take care and stay healthy. Bye.